Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show, another exciting guest. Let me tell you about today's show. You're talking about a beast mindset. This is definitely one of those. Let me tell you where we're about to go today. Imagine, if you will, strong family ties, a being woven from family. And all of a sudden, these family beliefs become so, I would use the word draining, mind draining. Imagine, if you will, coming from a structure of deep family ties, and all of a sudden you've been minimized. Let me use a different word here. Let's use the word a lifetime of prenatal criticism and rejection. Imagine that for a minute. Just sit back and think what that must be like. A lifetime. How do we judge a lifetime of criticism and rejection? In other words, when do we realize that the rejection and criticism has affected us? And when we do realize that it affected us, how do we get that beast mindset to say, enough? Let me get back my lifetime and start to project something better for myself and change the narrative. Today we have a young lady that has done that and a heck of a lot more. 60 years old, an accomplished author, going back to school to get multiple degrees. I mean, she's taken that rejection and that lifetime of criticism and rejection and turn it into definitely a beast mindset. That's welcome to the show. I'm going to get this Italian name right. It's Joni Marie Iraci.
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 And I'm not 60, I'm 74.
Wow. You look great.
Thank you so much. You're so sweet. You're
You look
awesome.
great.
You're awesome. You look great too.
So before we get into the this beautiful journey, you're Italian. I could tell by that last name.
No, my husband's Italian.
Oh, you married into the family tree.
I did, and it's great. It's better. They cook better than the Irish.
You're Irish. Okay.
Irish, English, and Austrian, actually. I'm a mutt.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell the viewers a little bit about you. You say you're a mutt, but I just think you have a beautiful mixture of all cultures.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. My grandmother's family came over on the second boat of the Mayflower.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm a settler. Yeah.
Tell the viewers a little bit about you. What was your life like? Because you mentioned a lifetime of criticism and rejection. How did all that come about?
Well, my mother was young when she had me. She was 20, but very sheltered, very, very Catholic, strict upbringing. Her mother died in childbirth, giving birth to the seventh child. Who knows what the truth is? You know, they didn't tell you the truth. They didn't talk much about themselves, and they didn't have therapy. There were 6 kids and they were split up. My first book, Reinventing Jenna Rose, kind of talks about it. Of course, it's fictionalized. So narcissistic, they don't even recognize themselves in the book. But so my mother, I didn't realize I thought this was normal, like to always be criticized and always be put down, and you can't do that. You're not good enough. You know, everybody. And what that does to your psyche is it kind of makes you try even harder. You're always looking for approval somewhere, and so you overgive and you overextend yourself, and I'm always helping. So I'm a nurse. I'm an RN. I'm a retired RN. And that, I guess, when I was in my 20s, I mean, she was always raging about something. Mostly with me. I have 3 siblings. They're younger and they didn't have the same experience. So, and they were kind of brainwashed too against me. And it actually came to a head in November. I'm 74 years old. My father died at age 99 in 2023. And his will, everything went to my mother, but if something happened to her first, it was equitable. The 4 of us would split it. So as soon as he died, she changed the will and I was disowned. So the way I look at it after, talking to therapists and studying it and analyzing it was jealousy because she was 20 years older than me and always envied that I was successful. Like, not that we were rich or anything like that, but I did well. My husband did really well. And so that was frowned upon, like you shouldn't. I don't know, there's something in the Bible about it's easier for not that we're rich, but the perception was we were. And it's easier for a camel to pass through the head of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. So that was the philosophy. And the put downs continued, from childhood on. It wasn't just verbal abuse, it was physical abuse up until I was 17, and then she couldn't anymore. So, I didn't feel good about myself until I became a nurse, and patients were grateful, and, so there was that. But then, like I raised 3 kids, and then I decided, I kept getting invited to Sarah Lawrence's open house for, continuing education. I got an invitation for about 10 years. I don't know how I got on their mailing list, but I lived not that far. So one day I decided, let me just go. My kids were, old enough to get in and out of the house by themselves. So I said, I'll go check it out. So long story short, I couldn't open the door. So I thought, oh my God, this is an omen. I'll never be able to go here if I can't open the door. But I got invited upstairs to talk to the director, and I got accepted, and I loved it. I was, of course, the eldest student by light years, but it was great. It was such a great experience. So I graduated from there in 2013, and then I took time off. I got jury duty. I got, federal criminal court, which helped me write my book because there's a court scene in there that was horrible. I didn't know anything about court, so I learned a lot. But all of this helped. I didn't have any self-esteem until I became a nurse, and until I had other people telling me I was good enough. And but I still have that stigma of trying to get approval. And in my mother, I went to see her in August. She died in November, and I went to see her in August. And, I was trying to show her like podcasts that I did, just like to get one crumb of an accolade that never happened. So, it's like such a final thing to get. The will was very sketchy. She could have been coerced. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, what do I do? It's not life-changing money that she left, but it's like a final slap in the face from the grave. And, like I always knew, like the older she got, she was 94 when she died, but the older she got, the more transparent she became. Like, oh, you have all this, and I had to share a bed with my sister, and things like that. Like she would jab.
So what do you didn't mean to cut you off. And
no, go ahead.
There's a few questions I want to ask.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Let's go back when you was talking about when this was happening, when you was in the house and you were young, and it went on till you were 17 years old. Two-part question here. Where was your father during this? And then the second part of that, why do you think, even though you had other siblings, that you was targeted?
I don't know. It was pretty calculated. They were like her disciples. I mean, they would, if they listened to this, they would be, I don't know. I mean, they don't, my husband and I helped all of them in some fashion, either medically or financially, or, got them the right doctors and all of that, and we were cast aside. So, it says more about them than it does about me. My father worshipped and adored my mother. He thought she was smarter than him. He thought he just did her bidding. If she said that I did something, he believed it. I had no ally, believe me. The woman who raised my mother was my grandmother's best friend, my maternal grandmother's best friend, single Irish lady, who lived in Manhattan, and that was my escape route. So back in the day, we moved to New Jersey when I was 11, and in those days, a kid could take the bus by themselves from New Jersey. My grandmother would meet me, and that was my safe space. I could feel that they loved me, and they, her and her sister, but home was not a safe place for me. And, my mother just, like, even when I was 19 and I was in a nursing school and I came home for Easter break and I dropped a dish on the floor and she started raging and screaming that I wasn't good enough. So I walked out. For 2 weeks, and I slept on the floor of friends' houses until I finally went back home. But I wish I didn't. Like, those are my regrets. My regrets are that I kept going back. Like, she just did crazy things. I mean, there was so much, there was so much evidence, but I kept trying. And so now I look back and I think, why did I even try? Look at the end result. I was disowned. I mean,
did anybody else in your family circle see what was going on, or was this just normalized behavior?
My sister is 3 years younger than me and totally oblivious to everything that's going on. Anything that happened to her in life, like, she had some, like, really strange situations. But, my mother, she was a victim. Everybody else was my mother. The Irish love victims. The obituaries are their sports page. They just love sad stories. They just
What do you mean? What do you mean?
They love that. Oh, somebody died. Yeah, like, look. Oh my God, like, they love it. Their gloom and doom is better than anything else in their books. So I can't, even my books, like, they're victims of something, the characters, but they always overcome. So they don't, like, wear the veil of victim.
What was the victim persona for your siblings?
Oh, well, my sister, had 3 bad marriages. So now you would think a diehard Catholic, that would be horrible, like divorce. Nah, she got a pass. My brother had, situation. He had a tumultuous teenage years and late teens, and difficulty. And my younger sister, she's just never grew up. So all of this was okay. Because why I look at it, like, psychologically, I think that enabled them to remain in the household. And I went off and did my own thing. Like, I guess I was rebellious or whatever,
I was going to say, do you think that you walked away because, I wouldn't use the word rebellious here. I would think that if you don't know what normal is and you feel like that's not the right way to be conducting yourself, then you begin to try to create an escape path. And I think maybe your escape path was, either marriage or going back to school.
Right. So for example, I was working as a nurse and I got phlebitis in my leg, blood clot, and I couldn't work. So I had to go home. I was like 26, whatever. And that was, like, awful. So, I was recovering. And then I got a job at a hospital in Manhattan. And I went for orientation, and it was like, they're going to put me on like the gunshot repair floor, and I was like, ugh. And we spent 8 hours like learning how to evacuate in case of a fire. It was a very old hospital that subsequently shut down and became condos. But my mother, she went into like this rage that I must be crazy because I didn't take this job, because I was sleeping, and she comes barging in the room like, what are you doing? Here, I made you an appointment with a therapist. So the therapist was the same age as me. So I had a real attitude, and I was like, I had $300 to my name, and I gave it to my mother, and I got a job at a hospital in New York that had housing. So I immediately had an apartment, and that was it. Oh, you're moving to Manhattan, like, you're going to get killed, it's crazy.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm just, I'm like laughing with you because it sounds like, let me go here. You had so much you had to deal with.
Yeah.
You get married. Were you still dealing with the same issues, trying to get validation or to find out?
Yes. Until like 2 months, 3 months before she died. Absolutely. And my mother was worked in a library her whole life. So I have a lot of humor. That's how I got through school, because, I was everybody's mom. And so I thought, oh, if you laugh at yourself first, it's disarming. So nobody laughed at me, at least not to my face, or whatever. So I that's how I got through, and I had a lot of fun, a lot of hard work. Don't get me wrong, lots of hard work. But yeah, I mean, I still was like, and now what do I do? Like, there's no shot at ever having any kind of approval, and it's very raw still. It's being disowned, and so I didn't know what to do. I almost had like a PTSD from it. I was hysterical when I got this will, and I just thought that it's not worth it. I know it. Like, it's about them. It's, how could you do that? Like, it's just yucky. I mean, I could never do that to a child ever, or to anybody, deliberately and willfully hurt someone. And we did everything, like medically helping, always running, and it was more about like, what have you done for me lately? Because everything that came before would, be erased. But so, I picked myself up by the bootstraps, and I went back to school. I graduated from Columbia University at 65. Do you think my mother said one word? No. Not one word. I said to her, I graduated from Columbia. You know how hard that was? Oh, nothing.
Did your husband tell you, look, we have our life. We're doing great here. And
he's as bad as I am.
Really?
Yeah, as far as, always giving, like, our first instinct is to help, like, cast aside. I mean, my mother wrote me a letter. I was 70 years old, and she wrote me a letter telling me I was a bad big sister to my 60 whatever year old sister, who's 12 years younger than me. It's like, she's a corporate executive at Liberty Mutual with a husband. Like, what do you want me to do? She doesn't talk to me for whatever reason. Yeah. So, like, it's so much dysfunction that it's almost toxic. But when I was so distraught over this rejection, which is what it is. It's like the ultimate nail in the coffin of the end of a era. So and the other thing, when I don't know why, but when I was 6 months old, she sent me to live with her aunt and uncle. And I don't know, I was there for like 6 weeks, so I don't know whether she was a danger to me, or nobody ever talked about that or would tell me like why that was the case. Like, I knew it happened because they'd be like, oh, they loved you so much and this and that. I'm like, who gives away their baby?
What I think is odd. What I think is odd is nobody stepped up to talk about.
No, because it was a different era. I'm 74. So in those days, I don't think self-esteem was invented till my kids were born in the 80s. Nobody cared what you were going through. It was almost, I thought it was normal, like, to get like hair. The first thing I ever published is something called Rage. And it was about, there's a student with one of my classmates at Columbia who witnessed her mother stab her grandmother to death. So, I mean, if you looked at her name is Christy. I'll tell her about you. We're friends. She is amazing. Her book is coming out in October. And I mean, if you looked at her, you would never think in a million years that she came from that kind of environment, because she's, like this little pert, little blonde, little girl look. She looks like she's 15. Yeah, and she started a magazine while she was a student called The Grief Diaries, which is since defunct. But I wrote something called Rage, and she published that, and it's about my mother. I was 6, and I remember vividly, I was 6, and she was so. And we were supposed to go have a mother and daughter night out, and she was enraged about something that I did at the age of 6, some horrible thing, and just came at me with the hairbrush. And my father, I remember he came in the room, like, I think when you have some traumatic thing happen at an early age, you remember it vividly, so maybe it's not exact. I remember the room. I remember my father coming in and like escorting her out so she would not kill me, I guess. But yeah, so what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Did
So
you
I was
did you get
resilient.
when your
Sorry.
mother passed? I know she was of a ripe, mature age when she passed, but did you even think about having her doing an autopsy to see if maybe she had some type of mental illness?
I have no control. I was disowned. My sister's kind of manipulative, and she insinuated herself. And yeah, it's kind of sketchy. I mean, she was 94, so they're not going to do an autopsy on a 94-year-old who had all kinds of things. But she, let me put it this way: they didn't die of. They both her and my father went into hospice pretty much because they were old, not because they had any like fatal illness,
Okay.
which was rather strange. But
But you don't think it's strange her actions all through your
no, I think she
childhood?
was. There are mean people. There are mean people, and there are vindictive people, and it's kind of crazy, but I was blamed for her childhood. Her upbringing was like something out of a Charles Dickens novel, so I had to hear about it from the age of 5. She started telling me
Were
this
your
story.
grandparents still alive?
No, my grandmother died in childbirth at 32, but I didn't complain to anybody about it until I was a teenager, and I complained to friends. So in fact, I met my next door neighbor a couple of years ago down here in Florida, and she said, "I was so afraid of your mother." And I was astounded, because I thought, wow.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, like,
Yeah.
somebody with that type of behavior pattern, other people had to have seen it, and I get it. That was a time where they saw it and just didn't say anything, and
that it was normal to
yeah.
beat up your kid, and it was normal to verbally abuse. But like, you don't. Of course, I went into the medical field, so then I would see, I take psychology and study all that. So, but my mother would say to me, "You're so funny. You should write. You should write." So I wrote, and nothing. She didn't even read my book. So, it was just
what did make you decide to write? What did make you decide to write? Was it because as a part of your therapy, or was let me go here. Let me go here with this, so this will make a little bit more sense. They bring in a therapist that's around your age. That didn't work. You're still trying to put the pieces together. So at the end of the day, was that a way to channel clarity in your own self? But at the same time, I sense a deep longing and caring for the condition that your mother has. So maybe at the same time, you're trying to do research within yourself to find out why is she acting like this? Because deep down, you know this isn't normal.
Yeah. Well, I knew it was personal. It was me. It was directed at me. But I kept, I don't want to say forgiving, but I would dismiss it and keep going back to get approval. And, I started writing as a teenager. I would write bad poetry, it's like get my angst out. But writing is cathartic. So you find out a lot about yourself when you're writing, and also this unbelievable Catholic upbringing of strict, insane, rules and just made no sense, the hypocrisy of the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic school, so I had these mean nuns all day, and then I'd come home and I'd like have to assess my mother's emotional temperature before I opened my mouth, and everything was punitive, everything. So, my father was more fun when he was, not under her thumb so much, but he never would have done this to me. But she was the one that, yeah.
With everything that went down, did you begin to, a two-part question, with so much going on, and you're going to a Catholic system, you got nuns that are being mean to you, but also teaching you the faith at the
Oh,
same time.
forget.
Yeah. And I mean, did you question? Did you really
All the
question
time, but
everything around you?
I questioned it in my head. I thought, even as a child, I was kind of intuitive, and I was very, my paternal grandmother was into all like, Edgar Casey and all this like
Yeah.
hood stuff, like spiritual stuff. So she was very interesting, and but I didn't see her that much. She would be all over the place, and but yeah, I was more like that, so I was always investigating and reading and things like that. But of course I questioned. I thought, here are these people that are preaching, love and kindness, and they're not acting that way. So, even as a kid. So then as an adult, you're kind of indoctrinated, and you think, oh my God, like you have to teach your kids the same thing, like that your mother taught you. I wrote this whole short story called Holy Skeptic about the hypocrisy and everything. But so I taught religion for 8 years, and I had one corrupt priest after another as pastors, one who would fight with me all the time, like, and he would scream at these kids in 8th grade. I said, you want to keep them in the flock? It's not going to happen. You're screaming at them. You're never going to see them again. I don't know what you think you're doing. Oh, we had so many fights. Turns out he was defrocked. He was, stealing. Oh my God, he was unbelievable. And the whole time pontificating about, whatever. So then we used to go to Italy all the time. So I was in the Vatican looking in there thinking, wonder what's going on now, because I was in the thick of the scandals in the Northeast, with the priests, the pedophilia and all that. And so, I just like the muse hit like a lightning strike. What if it was a girl involved somehow? So Vatican Daughter came to be, but it percolated for about 10 years. I had the idea. I didn't know where it was going. I just had the premise, and I put it aside, went back to school, wrote my first book, and then during the pandemic, I sat and 8 hours a day and wrote and researched until it was done. So I treated it like a job, but I never ever got approval from my family ever. My father, I think, might have read my first book because he was older, old, and he was writing down the names of the characters to try to keep them straight. But my mother never said a word about it. In fact, I know she didn't read it because there's one of the characters is a grandmother, and she's a great grandmother, and they call her Gigi in the book. And my mother just brought it up randomly that, oh, some friend of hers is a great grandmother, because my mother was a great grandmother, but didn't acknowledge that either. It wasn't. My grandson was not acknowledged in her obituary or my father's. So it's just
Are
it
you?
was. Jealousy is a horrible thing. I don't understand people who are jealous of other people, because it's not like we didn't have issues. My son was born with 4 holes in his heart. My husband had, stage 3 cancer. My son broke his neck in an accident. I mean, we've been through it. So, you're jealous of me because I have a nice house and new furniture. It makes no sense. But
How do you?
that's how people are.
I'm gonna ask. This is a pretty sensitive question. Are you angry at your dad for not stepping up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because he could have changed the dynamic, but he was, I guess, I don't know. I guess he ignored it, or I mean, he'd say crazy things. Like, he just had her on such a pedestal, and it was always my fault. Like, like, they never took responsibility for their behavior ever. It was this old world kind of, you must respect your parents no matter what. Like, no matter what, doesn't matter. So,
What do you think? What do you think about that? I mean, here it is.
I
You grew up
I
in the
don't.
church. You know, all these values, and at the same time, people being hypocritical, preaching one thing and indoctrinating a whole different pattern. Let's be real. How are you looking at life in general now? And both individuals are no longer here, and whatever stuff
Oh,
that
it's
they had,
very hard.
they took it to the grave with them.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, I have like a fantastic publisher. They're fantastic. They're in the UK, Collective Ink, on Fire Books. And, I don't know, sometimes things happen and you don't know why you're doing it. But I was trying to, I was alone, and I'm trying to think of like how I'm going to cope with this. And and it's strange living here compared to Manhattan. Manhattan is frenetic, and you go outside and there's always somebody to talk to. Here is like a ghost town. So I went on the website of the book, and I have a page of my own, and I was just looking up the readers who read the book, the manuscript, and decide whether they're going to publish you or not. They make 3 of them make a decision. One was my publicist for this is the 3rd book that's coming out. And one of the readers is a Daniela Norris. She's now the publisher. She's the publisher of fiction. They'd made her a publisher. And I just looked her up, and she started something called the Grief Council, International Grief Council. So I filled out the form on that website, and I just told her, who I was, and then she sent me an email right away, and she said, I'm traveling right now, and I would just want to make sure it's really you, because, well, I'm not that famous that anybody would impersonate me yet, but it happens. People are not, scammers are everywhere. So I said, yeah, it's really me. So she put me in touch with her co-worker, who helped her with this grief thing, who's this wonderful woman. She's 84, Lo Ann Meyer, and she claimed that she had a similar experience with her mother.
Right.
She's very sweet. She's not a counselor or anything, but she's so nurturing. So we talk. And she wrote a book called Celestial Conversations, where she claims that she wrote to her mother and her mother wrote back. Like, the handwriting is different. She writes in a journal. I do everything on the computer. I said, I don't want to conjure up my mother. I don't want to. I've never been afraid to die until now, because I don't want to see her again. I don't know what, I don't know what I believe me not. anymore. But yeah, so that is, I don't know, like, and I'm in like a business that is just nothing but rejection, so it's
Right.
like, it's like your whole like world, because I just take it in stride now. Like I don't even read reviews. I didn't, I would, when the books first came out, I was like reading the reviews all the time. And so I met,
What were some of the reviews? Because
most of them are great. Most of them are, like really good, but people are empowered by writing reviews. They think they have some kind of power over you, and they can analyze your writing, and they can, you know how hard it is to write a book?
yeah,
1% of people who start don't, only 1% finish, and even fewer publish. Well, now it's self-publishing is a big thing, but
you wrote
so
you wrote two books. But what? Let me go here. What was the real in-depth reason for writing the two books, and what were you wanting the people to get out of it? Because let's get real. So far, it sounds like, and I don't mean this to come off wrong by any means. When you say I'm not afraid to die and I don't want to meet my mom again, it sounds as if you still are trying to get answers to questions that
yeah.
may have to be answered when you do die.
I don't know. According to all these people who think they're in the know, you're different after death and this and that. I'm like, how do you know? Like, what are you talking? I just, so she told me to start writing letters. So I started writing letters so it gets my anger out. But you know what? I'm better off not dwelling on it, because
Right.
there's nothing I can do. So I write, my first book was my thesis. I
Right.
started this as an undergrad, and it's very different than how I started, and it's even different than it was. My thesis reader was the former editor of Harper's, who is awesome and just a riot, and he just was like, well, Joni needs to roll up her sleeves and redo this, or say blankety blank blank, Ben. So I did. I rolled up my sleeves. I said blankety blank blank, Ben, but then I rolled up my sleeves and rewrote the whole book.
What was the hardest part about rewriting the book? So to speak, rewriting, because he said either blankly blank or get in there. So evidently he read something in the book that he said, you know what, this ain't really going to resonate. So when you had to go
Yeah.
back and do it again, what did you have to put in there to make the book what
Oh, I don't
publishers said
know.
was wow?
Sometimes I look at some things I write and I'm like, did I really write that? Like when I sit down at the computer, I can't write on, like, I write notes on papers everywhere, because I'm old school, so I have to have backup, But I don't know. I just have a muse that hits and it just flows. Sometimes, not always, like sometimes you have a little block. But the Vatican daughter, that took about a year to write. The second book, the third book that's coming out, is the second in the series of the Vatican stories. And I had no intention of writing that. And I woke up with the first line in my head.
Mm.
So a lot of times what I do is I will read what I wrote before I go to sleep at night. So then it's swirling around in my head. And that works. Right now I'm writing some short stories, or I'm finishing short stories I started at Columbia. So, my first book was Workshop to Death, it's brutal to go into writing workshops, and it's even more brutal when you're my age and, kids who are your kids' ages and younger are critiquing you. I mean, they were brainiacs. They were geniuses, but they didn't have much life experience either. So they'd say things to me like, that could never happen. I was like, well, it kind of did. It kind of does. Wait till you get out in the world. But yeah. So
Why did you pick the name the Vatican?
well, because that's where it's about a pope who has an affair, and they kidnap It's inspired by the true life papal kidnappings of Jewish children in 1859 by Pope Pius IX.
Well, why do you think you gravitated to that type of um, story based on your life story?
Yes,
Because you feel
because
your life was taken away through not only the church but through values?
I don't think I put that much into it. I mean, it's a thriller, and it's a story that needs to be told because the Vatican is like secretive, and people don't know what goes on in there. Of course, Dan Brown inspired me. I got to meet him. I got to go to his home, and we talked about this. And yeah, he's the one who told me don't read reviews. So. Yeah, of course, I don't sell books like he has millions,
What was
multiple
the most
hundreds.
interesting part of the book? Every author who brings a little bit of himself or herself into a novel, there's always that one chapter or that one particular area that really resonates with the creator's whole life's journey.
Right. Well, the first book is about, a mother, fictionalized, of course, a mother who rejects her daughter.
Right.
So, but the second book is about a mother who fights to get her daughter back. The daughter's kidnapped by some cardinal and is sequestered in the Vatican and raised in the Vatican, and the mother's injured in the process of the kidnapping. So I know Italy pretty well. So she's sequestered in a convent in Venice. And, there's this, so in order to give the reader a reprieve from all this, this turmoil, I have the sights, the sounds, and the smells and the taste of Italy in there. Like they stop and have food and they drink wine and that kind of thing. And so, I did a tremendous amount of research. So I get it in there.
Did you want?
But it is it. I mean, if the church had not had all of these scandals that they covered up and all the priests that got moved around who were doing no good, up to no good, I never could have written this book because it wouldn't have made sense. That how could there be a scandal? I mean, there are still people. I was invited to a book club to go talk at a book club for my first book, and they won't read the second one because they're diehard Catholics and very naive, obviously, because, it's pretty apparent what's gone on. It's not like it's a secret.
What made you decide to go that deep? I mean, because you're dealing with your own. I'm not going to use the word abandonment issues because that's it goes deeper than that. But to transition from not having validation from your mom and your dad to getting into, I guess one might call it a conspiracy theory, but we all know about the Vatican and the priests being moved and the molestation with boys and not knowing exactly what happened to these people. You opened up Pandora's box. Why the shift?
Well, this was voted the best conspiracy thriller of 2025, which was, oh my God, that was great. And I got a couple of awards, but I love research. I love it. It fuels me. So, you get an idea, then you start looking things up. I had no idea about the papal kidnappings in 1859. I had no clue. But I was researching Italian Jewish last names for a character, and I came upon that story. And it was actually a book was written about one particular family who lost a child that way, was kidnapped. And it was written by a professor at Brown, David Kurtzer, who I contacted. And I said to him, well, how come we don't know about this story? The Catholics don't know. I don't never heard of this. He said, yeah, well, the Catholics were embarrassed that they, subsequently embarrassed that they allowed the Pope to do this, and then the Jews were embarrassed that they allowed it to happen. But different time, 1859, the Pope was in charge of Italy. It was the Papal States. It wasn't united. So, I find all these things out. So when you start writing and you get an idea, then you start going down these, like paths that take you on into a maze like you never expected. So, and then it all came together, after much revision. And
how much of that information that you uncovered with working with other individuals to collaborate on that project? Let's look at current situations as it relates to the Vatican, as it relates to child pornography type behavior that the so-called archbishops in the Roman and the Catholic churches all have been accused of. But you know what I think is really funny? You never hear what happens to these people.
No. There are a lot of organizations. Actually, I reached out to one to see if they'd be interested in reading the book, even though it's fiction. I didn't hear back from them, because I said I wasn't sexually abused by a priest, but I was verbally abused and put down, and like I was emotionally abused because they had such power and they didn't care. So there's all kinds of abuse. However,
you would think
this girl in the character in the book, she's not a victim of sexual abuse. The Pope is her father, and he doesn't acknowledge her. She's just there because, well, I made him American, the first American Pope, because I never in a million years thought there would be an American Pope.
Right.
In fact, I did a podcast, and one of my first podcast interviews was the author's show, and the very nice host said, I got to tell you, I read the book, and it's very plausible, except there will never be an American Pope. So never say never, because a month later, we had an American Pope. So, yeah. And, people are stupid. My cousin called me up and said, you better get somebody to start your car. And I said, why? He goes, because the Vatican's going to blow it up. I said, I don't think they even know I exist. That's pretty stupid.
Have you gotten any unwelcome responses from people at the Vatican, the Catholic Church,
No, I was just friended on LinkedIn by some priest in Denmark. So I accepted it. I'm just curious to see what he has to say. No, I have not had any issue. I had one not every podcast host is professional like you. So I had a publicist a marketer who put me on a lot in the beginning. I've been on like 20 or 30. And one of them, obviously, this guy was in his kitchen, and very unsophisticated. And the first thing out of his mouth is, what is your relationship with God? And I thought that was such an odd question because it has nothing to do with, it's about scandal and a mother and daughter relationship and a mother who will fight the most powerful entity on earth to get her child back. It has nothing to do with God. It's their, and I said, what about their relationship with God? There's people are walking around with collars and, all this garb and all this wealth and, that's not how it's supposed to be. I took a fantastic class in undergrad. It was Roman art history, but it explored the origins of Christianity and how it all came about. And, not so much with the Christ, but with subsequently the structure of the Catholic Church. And it's not supposed to be this church, brick and mortar and dripping in gold. It's supposed to be, Catholic means ecumenical. So you're supposed to be out in the world and, doing good. But let
me ask this question to piggyback off of what you said. And you can answer it if you want to, but because a lot of this is faith based, and even though you're talking about a young girl, now that you've created both of these different platforms for your book, the alleyway, I mean, how do you question religion? Not God itself, but how do you question it?
Formal religion. I'm in the thick of it down here. There's a lot of born-agains, and they're very preachy. They don't do anything for anyone. They do not lift a finger to help anybody ever. They don't believe in that, which is astounding, and I found that out the hard way. So one particular who's always preaching to me, to the point where, and I was his go-to for everything because he's older, and I would drive him and feed them, and his wife is crazy. So I did until like when my mother was dying, and I went out, I came back, and I had an email from him telling me all the good that you do does not matter. It doesn't count. You are not going to heaven because you don't go to my church. Now, mind you, he's been to 8 churches in 3 years, so I don't know what he's
Wait a minute. Hold that thought for a minute. Here's somebody. I want to make sure that the audience hears this. Here's a guy that went to 8 churches, and he purposely told you you're not going to the kingdom because you don't attend his church?
Correct.
Wow.
So, I let him, my New York came out all over him. So, we're done. But interestingly, another neighbor, lovely people. Now, her husband was part of that group, but he never shoved it down your throat or said a word. He was a very nice man. So he was dying, physically dying in the house, in the hospital bed. And all these men would come and they'd talk about the Bible or whatever once a week. And she would, leave them coffee and what have you. So he died in September. And they came and they talked and they praised the Lord and this and that with the wake and then the funeral and then the celebration of life. That was a whole other thing. And not one of them has reached out to the widow since September when he died. Only me. So that, like, what part of the gospel are you reading that, they just pick and choose? I don't know. So I gave up.
Do you now question faith as it relates to the first book and what you went through? Because the first book is basically your story. But I'm going to tell you, this is what I think. The first book is a more in-depth journey of you. The fiction book is the persona of what could have, what may have been had you not evolved, so to speak. That's just my theory. What on the 2 creations of the book.
Yeah, the first book is actually a fictionalized. I spent a lot of time in Manhattan, so it's set there, and this girl escapes a bad situation. It's kind of like, I guess, what I would have done had I had the courage when I was a kid to run away. She ran away.
Right.
But, I was too scared. I wouldn't do that. But the second book, I don't know. It was just an evolution of ideas. And, I took that class and that I was inspired by David Castriata, who taught it. He was amazing. And he's Italian, born Catholic, and he's very funny. So he grew up in New York, and he said nobody went to church because my mother had to make the gravy. That's like the tomato sauce in the morning, and my father wouldn't go without her, so nobody went. And then they moved to Scarsdale, New York, which is very Jewish, area. And so he wanted to be Jewish because everybody was getting bar mitzvah and had tons of money. The kids would get tons of money, and so he graduated from Columbia, I guess, and he married a Jewish girl, so he became Jewish, and then he divorced her and married a Catholic who's too lazy to become Jewish. So he had this whole story. But, we went into depth about, Constantine and how this whole thing came about with, the persecution of the Christians and how
It is so funny you said
it's
that.
so
I
fascinating.
just literally talked to someone about Constantine right before you came on
Oh, get
the
out,
show.
really?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people don't know Constantine's role in the transformation of the Catholic Church.
They don't know anything. People don't know. They don't know. They don't want to know. Yeah. Well,
what? Let me ask you this question before we have to wrap up. Let me ask you this question, and I do encourage the viewers to get both of these books. They're definitely worth reading, and if anything, it can open up your mind. So I'm gonna go here with this question: what should the viewers get out of both of these books in your life, and what happened to you? Because let's get real. This all started because we had two parents that handicap you by telling you what you couldn't be. And now look where you're at today. You changed that mindset.
Well, in all fairness to my parents, my father's father left him when he was like, I don't know, 6 or something. So he was cheating on my grandmother with some other woman in like 1930 something. So, they didn't have like role models really.
But do we keep using those as excuses for their behavior?
Yeah, I guess I do. Because, then it would be less about me, but I think it's more about me. I think it's
almost like giving them a pass by saying, okay, well,
yeah,
Jimmy left.
Right,
but,
you're right.
Yeah, but
100%.
What should they get out of it? What should the viewers get out of your story in the two books?
If you're a victim, don't let it like drag you down like a weight. You got to rise above. Don't ever give up. I just never give up. Like, please, publishing is the hardest thing. You're always rejected by somebody, and marketing books is like a nightmare. I'm not good at it. And, but I never give up. If you have a dream, if you give up, you'll never reach your goal. And it took a lot of bravado to go back to school. Like I had a 17-year-old in my class in the undergrad, it's insane. And then you go, and you have professors who are the same age as your son, that was pretty weird. But you know what? I did it, and I don't know if I could do it again. Going to Columbia was like an Olympic event to get there, like 4 trains every day. But I just thrived, and it gave me, I just feel like it gave me credibility, to overcome all this and to succeed at, it's an accomplishment to write a book. And I help people. I get people constantly contacting me. Can you review this manuscript? Can you, I just started a business because I'm tired of people picking away at my brain for free, so I have to charge.
So let me ask you the bigger question, and congratulations on going back to school, getting into Columbia, taking your pain and changing your beast mindset. But let's get real. Let's talk about, before we close out, let's talk about the biggest obstacle to overcome right now. And that's your mother passing and your father and not receiving the one thing that you really wanted. Mm-hmm. How have you overcome that? And
I haven't yet because she died in November. And I guess in my gut, I knew that I was going to be excluded, but it still was a shock, that it was so final. And I mean, she looked me in the eye in August and called me my girl and held my hand. And how do you do that? That will was changed in 2023. As soon as my father died, she changed it. So how do you do that? Like to me, I mean, the way I put it, compartmentalize it so it doesn't like believe me, it nighttimes are the worst because I start thinking and I can't sleep. But I mean, it'll probably take a while to really recover because it's a recovery. It's just like, it's so final. It's like, I can't, I'm a mother and I can't for the life of me understand how a mother could do something like that. Like, it's the ultimate punishment from the grave. And there's no reconciliation ever. Like, there's no, I mean, my mother's sister was a shrew too. The two of them, they grew up in the same household. But when she was dying, she apologized to her children and they had a little powwow around their bedside. I didn't have that. So, this friend of mine who wrote the book about celestial conversation said, oh, she's very sweet and kind of, ethereal. And she's like, oh, she'll respond in some fashion. I said, it'll be demonic. I don't want to say, I don't know. I'm just going to have to come to terms with it and move on, and just say it was them. It wasn't me, obviously. I mean, but, it's still, you're still looking for, accolades, and especially from your parents. If you don't get it when you're a child, like, that's so important. I'm always telling my kids and my grandson how wonderful they are, even if they're not. But,
Well,
it's
you
important.
have children now, right?
Yeah.
And you have a husband.
I do.
So
It's
you
great.
have the greatest life that you can ever imagine. Your mother's gone, and
Right.
one day you will get that opportunity, I hope, to ask those questions. But right now, I think the best thing is to look at everything that you got, the things that you've accomplished, and go, you know what? As important as that might have been at that point in your life, look how you was able to overcome it to get to where you're at today. Bestseller books, great family, and you know what? You can put that on the back burner now because look where you're at now. You definitely,
You're right.
You definitely took
Thank
that
you.
peace mindset and elevated it way beyond what you thought you could have done.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah. You know what?
You so
I want the viewers to how can the viewers reach out to you and get that book?
I have a website. It's my name at www.joni, Joni, Marie, Marie, Iraci, Iraci. The book, Reinventing Jenna Rose, is they're both on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and now they're being distributed. The Vatican's books are being distributed and promoted by Simon and Schuster, which is huge.
Wow.
So I'm very happy. And I have a wonderful editor. I pull out the old lady card and he helps me with formatting and stuff that gets screwy. Technology is a nightmare. When you're my age, we didn't grow up with it. So, but it's fun. Yeah. I love to hear from readers if they come on my website. Right now, I am scammed. I get 25 scamming marketing emails a week. I got a very convincing email from somebody claiming to be Danielle Steele, the famous author. It was so convincing. I sent it to my editor. I said, what do you think? He said, sorry to tell you, it's a scam. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
AI can do some remarkable things.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah. So love to have you come back, share more of your stories.
I would love
to hear if the Vatican reaches out to you on your books.
Wouldn't that be something?
Ladies and gentlemen, like I said before, make sure you subscribe, click, like, share, follow, touch that button, pass it on to somebody. All it takes is one click to make a difference in somebody's life as well as your own. This has been another, and I do mean another, exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.